First things first, however, so the reason why I'm pushing this interview so hard at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, my recent sit-down with Justine Winter. This came up on my X feed recently. I'll bring it up on screen for you in a moment. In my opinion, if this is true, it very much so vindicates a lot of what Justine was saying. It very much vindicates a lot of what Justine was saying. This was a screenshot that I saw somebody had posted to X. It's from Reddit. But it's a very heartbreaking story if it is true. And it's one that we really should be taking notice of, because if it is in fact a true story, it's one that really speaks to the heart of a lot of topics that me and Justine talked about in that interview. That being the concept of rogue nurses and corrupt practices within the NHS. It's titled, this post, and I'll bring it up on screen for you in a moment. My father died in hospital because two nurses attending him could not communicate with each other or the doctor. Now, in that interview, ladies and gentlemen, I actually asked Justine outright, is there a link between immigration, mass immigration, asylum seekers, all of these other things, all of these other initiatives, and rogue nurses popping up in our hospitals? Obviously, with asylum seekers and immigration and the lack of need to learn English and so on, and with the ways we've been told in Britain that we have to bend over backwards to accommodate people of foreign lands and foreign customs and foreign languages, that we need to change everything about our home to suit them, despite they are the guests here, who are running on borrowed time, a lot of them, with the way that the sentiment is changing, and has been changing for a long, long time. You're only seeing it now, ladies and gentlemen, because of how much more the ideas have become mainstream, because of how many more people have woken up to what's truly going on. But I asked Justine, was there a link between asylum seeking, immigration, all this stuff, and rogue nurses popping up in hospitals? She answered emphatically yes. It's very easy to see, ladies and gentlemen. And one of the things that employers will do, whether it's, I won't name any companies actually, right? You know the companies I'm talking about. The delivery companies that were profiting off of illegal labor, because it's essentially enables them to be able to pay dirt cheap wages, slave wages essentially, because people coming over from other places, when everything's being put up by the taxpayer, they don't need to pay them as much. They don't need to pay them as much. They can get away with working for a lot less, and the employers can get away with paying them a lot less. So as a result, they make more money. Well, the NHS is a business. So why would we think the practices would be any different? It's easy to see then why they would want to bring in these rogues, not give them even the most, basic of training, shove them in a uniform, allow them to wig swap and badge swap and all of these things in their little gated, or not the little gated communities, but in these little village communities they have for themselves, and go all up and down the country, potentially allowing them to work for a lot cheaper. All the while, your family members are suffering. There's been many cases that Justine has been brought to my attention, right, of patients suffering at the hands of these people. And sadly, this person in this post has lost their father, if it is a genuine post. I have reason to believe that it is true, from what I've been told. And Justine actually corroborated this, or hinted that there's a good chance that this is true, and that we're going to see more of it as things continue, unless we really demand that the authorities do something about it, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that they're really going to. I think that they're going to obfuscate away from this as much as possible, as they always do. As they always do. They'll set up another branch. They'll say lessons learned. They'll say all this stuff, right? Now, we need to push for true accountability. It's not going to come very easily. But this is the post. I'll bring it up on screen. My father died in hospital because the two nurses attending him could not communicate with each other or the doctor. My father died in hospital last week in England. Cause of death was a medication error. The two nurses who were looking after him were unable to communicate with each other. My father's best friend and I watched as they frantically bounced between English and other languages, 2 other languages to be precise. Neither one was capable of speaking proficient English. When a doctor rushed onto the floor, neither nurse could clearly tell the doctor which medication had been administered that caused the reaction. He pointed at a computer and asked them to bring the records up. From what I gather, neither nurse had bothered entering or finishing their records on the computer system. My father passed away in front of me and his best friend because of this medication error. It's been a week now, and the hospital still hasn't contacted me to apologise or offer an explanation for what they are doing about these two nurses. His best friend and I complained 2 days after he passed, and then they ask, is there any way I can get the police involved in this? Would it count as manslaughter in some way? I wouldn't bet on the police or any of the investigative authorities really doing anything. If I'm completely honest, I don't really see them, doing anything at least of note. But what you're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, if this is in fact a genuine case, anybody that says that it's not important now, that nurses, that these staff, whoever they are, when they come from other areas of the world, that it's not important that they learn how to speak English, or at least how to communicate in the common language of the area that they are in, which in England should absolutely be English. No ifs, no buts. The clue is in the name of the country. It directly led to someone's death. So the next time somebody says that common language is not important, the next time you hear somebody, complaining or whatever, because they're hearing a bunch of foreign languages or whatever, just think this is what it could potentially be leading to in the most extremes of cases, in the most important environments that our loved ones and ourselves can end up in a lot of the time. Makes me think back to my time on intensive care very, very graciously that I got as lucky as I did. Because I was at a vulnerable time at that point in July of 2023, when my family were called in and told that there was a good chance that I would not survive a particular night. When I came down with septic meningitis, I covered that in a past podcast episode, but I think it was on the other show that I did when I first started doing any kind of podcasting. Think to myself that I was very, very lucky indeed. I have people that have been in hospital since that nearly died because of medication negligence. One of them nearly got overdosed on codeine, for example. And when you see these things about records not being done, another thing we talked about in my interview with Justine, this is that interview, parts of that interview that we talked about, ladies and gentlemen, coming to life right before your eyes. So if you haven't gone, after you like and share this video and hit subscribe, follow on Rumble, all of this other stuff, wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify or Amazon Music, whatever. After you do all that, after you like good stuff, make sure you got notifications on and all this stuff, because the algorithm isn't great and I'm often getting demonetized, but you guys love to celebrate, right? And I find it funny, by the way. I'm putting those sarcastic posts up. I hope they come across like that. I find them funny. Please go and share that interview, because people need to know. People need to know that this is going on. They need to know that there's a lot of people in our hospitals that aren't who they claim to be. There's a lot of people in our hospitals that aren't who they claim to be. In fact, I'm going to bring it up a little bit quick if I can. I'm not sure if it will let me do this, because it's a different way of bringing things up than I otherwise would. I'm going to try and bring up the image in question, which I think is extremely important. So if you want a clear-cut example of this going on, ladies and gentlemen, you need look no further than this, and it should be coming up on screen for you now. This is the actual image that Justine sent me, right, prior to our first interview. And I put this up on X as well when I was talking about this stuff. A little spat, a little not even argument, but like conversation I got into somebody on X when I pointed out that somebody was being very disingenuous about the boats arriving in Wales and so on. I got a bit more to go over with regards to that a little bit later on, ladies and gentlemen. Do stay tuned. But you're seeing here, ladies and gentlemen, this is Justine herself on the left. And the nurse she's taking a photo with is not who her badge would have her say she is. And you can see that clearly because the badge on the nurse on the right was quite clearly of African or some other kind of dark-skinned descent. See if I can zoom in just a little bit more and move it over a little bit. You can clearly see the badge on there, ladies and gentlemen, and this is in Glamorgan, mind you, is of a light-skinned nurse. The races are completely different, and you could even see that with the smudge on the badge itself. We all obviously need to be far more switched on with that than we are. I can promise you that, ladies and gentlemen. It could be your father. It could be your mother. It could be your sister. It could be anybody else who's close to you, you know? Please don't let it be them. I'm just getting the next things ready, ladies and gentlemen. That's why I'm not looking at the webcam. Please don't let it be them. If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valleys X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.